I feel, I'm not sure if it's accurate, but I feel like I probably owe you some time from last week, maybe the week after, the week before that. So maybe this one will be a little bit shorter, but it should be a little more fun.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look at Jesus Land. Have any of you been to Jesus Land?
I live in Jesus Land.
What's that?
I live in Jesus Land.
You live in Jesus Land? All right. Sarah lives in. Anybody been to Sarah's house?
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you right now, you're in Jesus Land right now.
Oh,
all right.
There you go.
So Jesus Land is the church.
Everywhere.
So you're not at church, but you're at a church event. So it's sponsored by Jesus Land. So and this is the last one we're going to be doing of this book. This is the cap. This is ending. It is Palm Sunday next week. So, it's Palm Sunday next week. So, or this week.
This is coming week.
Easter next week.
Yeah.
So these soup suppers are ending. The evening prayer as well as this series. And so we're going to end on Jesus Land. And what are we talking about when we're talking about the church? So, because everything we've been talking about is the idea that when you have a culture that has walked away from religion, well, what does that do? Well, what it does, one of the things that it does is it creates a culture that doesn't have any intrinsic value, meaning, or purpose. So you've got to find that somewhere else. And what we've walked through is all the different ways in which people find that outside of the church. So how are we talking about the church? And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the church, and basically we're going to look at the two kind of main ways to understand the church, and then we're going to dissect the two of them, okay? So there are one of the most, I got to skip through these first two slides. All right, the church. So what is the purpose of the church? And when you're talking about the purpose of the church, this is going to depend on what kind of person you're talking about, or what kind of person you're talking to. So obviously, there's a vertical dimension of the church. What do I mean by vertical dimension in the church? Any ideas?
You mean like hierarchy?
Growth and decline?
Yeah, connection to God. I mean, one of the things that we're doing in the church is that we've shown up to worship God, right? That is the fundamental purpose of the church, is that we've showed up to worship God. But there's also a horizontal dimension in the church. It's not all vertical. There's the vertical dimension where we're interacting with God. There's also a horizontal dimension. What is the purpose of the church horizontally? Okay, lots of answers all on the same lines. Yep, all right. So generally, what people do is they look at church through one of two lenses. And so what you have is the first lens is that the church is a hospital for sinners. Okay? Does that make sense? And so if that's your view of the church, then what you believe on a horizontal level, there's still a vertical level where we're worshiping God, but on a horizontal level, what you believe is that the main function of the church is to reach out to the lost, the hurting, the broken, and engage them in a variety of ways. Does that make sense? All right. So there's a second view, And if the first view is a hospital for sinners, what's the second view?
Fire insurance.
We're going to put that in the third category. I'm sure that it is a category, though. Second category, though.
Place for the righteous together?
For what? For what purpose?
Education.
There you go. Put Keith and Pat's answer together, and what you're going to get is a schoolhouse for saints. Okay? So there's two lenses through which people view the church. One lens is this is a place, a hospital for sinners. The other lens is this is a schoolhouse for saints. What you will find is generally, not always, but almost always, you'll be able to go into a church, spend a month at that church, and you'll know what category they emphasize. Because most churches do not emphasize both. Most churches are emphasizing one of these categories. What is Holy Apostles?
Hospital. The schoolhouse for saints.
Yes. In all honesty, it primarily functions as a schoolhouse for saints. I am a teacher by nature. It's what I do. It's what I love. And so, because of that, we do a lot of this kind of stuff, which generally would fall under the schoolhouse for saints category. So, for example, there's nobody here tonight who is not affiliated with Holy Apostles in some way. Meaning that there's nobody who just strolled in off the streets, right? Well, it's questionable about Billy and Carol. But, but the rest of y'all. No, I mean, we all know each other, right? You know, there's no surprises. There's no who's that weird dude over there munching brownies in the corner? Okay? So we all know each other. So it is the body of believers gathered for the purpose of learning and growing. It's a schoolhouse for saints, even though we're not saints, we're sinners. But you get the idea. Whereas a hospital for sinners is one that is doing soup kitchens, has a thrift store attached to it, has a team that is always going to the areas where the broken are and reaching out to them. We do some of that because I have a heart for that. So we do, we support Nancy Oliver in her prison ministry. I want to support that more and more and more. One of the ways that we support that is that they send prayer requests from the prison, from the actual inmates to Holy Apostles. And I pass those on to the Daughters of the King, and they are praying for them. And that's really cool. Another way that we participate with them is that we are considered to be like a safe church, which just means that when they get released and they say to Nancy, well, I really want to plug into church and write my life, do you have any ideas? And she says, where are you moving? And they say, Brevard, then we are a church that she is going to send them to. With the idea that they will be embraced and loved and cared for at Holy Apostles. So we do have some of that. We also have Daily Bread with Doug and Elizabeth and some others, Jennifer and Kay, and a whole group of people that are serving in Daily Bread. And I would like to do more of that. But you could not say that that's our emphasis over a schoolhouse for saints, right? It's pretty clear where the emphasis is at Holy Apostles. Is that fair? So if you were to go into a church, what you'll find is they generally emphasize one or the other category. Is that fair? It's hard to emphasize both. And I would say, not trying to, butter them up or anything, but I would say the closest that I've seen to somebody who can do both is Bishop Greg. because he truly has a heart for the broken, and he truly has a doctrine for the saints. But it's really, really hard to hold those together. This is generally how churches function in one of those categories primarily. Now, and you can put it in another way, does the church prioritize relief or growth? And I think, obviously when you put it that way, I am prioritizing growth with the idea that you all get filled up. I know we're moving into trickle-down economics here, but with the idea that you all get filled up and then you go out into your community and you sprinkle Jesus everywhere you go. That's the idea. That if you become so full of Jesus that you will take him into your communities, and it's more of an organic growth that takes place rather than something that we're manufacturing at Holy Apostles. Meaning that your neighbors and your, hopefully not my neighbors, but maybe your neighbors trust you and like you, and there's a relationship there, or your coworkers or family members. So obviously we prioritize growth. I'm not saying one or the other is right. In fact, what I would say is you go with the strengths of what you have at the congregation that you are. And so I believe that our strength is in growing. That's why we emphasize that. If we had people who were like, let's get out in the community and go do it, let's make a difference, then I'm like, okay, let's get them up and rolling and let's do it. Let's start with Ted first and then Billy.
This is just my observation, having grown up in the church, the parish that I grew up. I called it a religious Rotary Club. And it really didn't fit either a hospital for sinners or a schoolhouse for saints. It was a social club.
Social club, yeah.
That if you were the right people, you went to that church. And our family went anyway, but
They're like, oh, Ted's here again.
yeah, yeah. But that's the way I looked at it, and I don't know if that. I mean, it certainly doesn't fit the text.
It does not fit either of those categories, but it is its own category. And it is a valid, it's not a valid category, but it is a real category that exists. There are many churches that do function as primarily a social club. But we're primarily looking at churches that actually have some sort of ministry going on. Those churches, in my estimation, are not worth talking about, but there are many of them. And it would be a third category. And it would trump, sorry.
Did it again.
It would place higher than Pete's Fire Insurance church, which there are fewer of those. Okay. So you're all with me on this, okay? And, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Billy.
Been in parishes where you get one attitude with the 8 o'clockers and a totally different attitude with the 10:30 people. Maybe two different approaches in one church.
You can have that if you have the leaders to facilitate it. So let's say we had 2 priests at Holy Apostles, and you had me, and you had you had Stephen Doss was my assistant, or I was Stephen Doss's assistant. Either way, then you would certainly have both categories functioning at one church. But generally, to find both categories so alive in one individual is very difficult. But if you do have a variety of leaders, and it could even be lay leaders that are super involved and like ready to go, then you can have both categories. So I don't want to say that you don't have churches that function in both, but it is rare, and you need to have everything in place to have those things. Was there anybody else who had a hand up that I met? Yeah, Tom?
I've been to large churches where they do have both because they have the people to do it. When we have a church this small, it is very difficult to have both functions, particularly when you need 20, 30 people in each category to function.
Yeah.
You know, so I think size also makes a big difference.
Yeah, and they're both tricky. They both have their difficulties in getting them up and running, and one of the difficulties is you have an older generation that can't come out to either, and then you have a younger generation that also can't come out to either because they have their families, and generally all that they can do is Sunday, for many, many reasons, but their life is revolving primarily around their kids. And so what you end up with is you end up with a group of people kind of much like what we have here, which is a group that is kind of in the middle, and not raising kids primarily, but not at the point where you can't go out and do things. So you're at the point where you can actually pick and choose what you want to do, which is kind of a nice place to be, because when you're raising kids, a lot of times you don't have those options. And so it begins to be a little trickier. So when you have those people, then you figure out what camp you're going to be in, and that's where you focus. But it does limit the number of people that can be involved. So if you look around here, what you don't see is you don't see Jeff and Julie Simmons, and you don't see the Camaruccis, and you don't see my wife, and you don't see Rebecca. You don't see Harvey. You don't see every family that has kids at Holy Apostles. What you see is that category of people that you all fit into, which is a very unique category. I think it's, personally, it's the category that gives you the most traction in a church, because you can actually do something, whereas the other categories are very difficult, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and to be able to do, in this size church, so you've already shrunk Holy Apostles down to, let's say that we have like 120 active people, not on a Sunday, but 120 active people at Holy Apostles. Well, you've already cut Holy Apostles down to about 60 once you take away all the people that can't come out at night, and then you take away all the people that have families and aren't going to be able to come out at night. And so now you've shrunk your pool down to about 60 people. And on any given night, you're hoping to get about 50% of them. So now you're looking at about 30 people. You can't do both. And so you do kind of what you can do. Carol?
Holy Apostles has really changed over the years, because when I was in my 40s and 50s and heavy in the prison ministry and street ministry, I had all kind of support from here. The church kept me supplied with blue jeans and t-shirts and whatever I needed. And it was really a heavy, and Horses Helping the Handicapped. We did a lot of outreach things that were physical, but then I found myself, as I've gotten older, I've had to pull away from, especially when the guns came out that time.
Yeah, when she almost got shot.
I mean, it changes everything. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was when Father Lou was here. He wasn't into teaching like you are. It does change with leadership.
Yeah, and so if you were to hire a new rector, you'd say, you got to get out of here. We're tired of you. You got to bring in a new person. Holy Apostles is going to change with the person that you're bringing in, with the gifts that individual has. And that's just a natural thing that takes place. Sarah?
But another thing that has changed since you were in your 40s is that
I got old.
a lot of the population around here, the people that had kids in the church have had their kids grow up and move away, and we don't have as many of that generation coming back. So you've got a whole different group of people. I understand from people that used to be youth leaders and Sunday school teachers and stuff like that, that place was full over there every Sunday with kids and stuff, and teenagers and so forth, which we have practically none of right now, because, and part of it is the community around the church has aged out.
Yeah, and your church is it's not just going to go by the gifts that the leader has. It's going to go by the gifts that the congregation has. It's also going to go by the demographics of the community. And all of that is going to filter into what kind of church you have. Unless you have people that are willing to travel outside of their community into this community, which we do have a good bit at Holy Apostles. We have a lot of people that travel a great distance to get here. And by great distance, I would say 20 minutes or further is pretty great. I would say if you're passing up 2 Episcopal churches to get here, that's pretty great. That's impressive. And I know many people that are passing up multiple Episcopal churches to get here. And it says something, but it's very difficult. It's harder to get the word out to those people because you're not in the community. And then it's harder to get them to commit because they're not in the community. And then it's infinitely harder to get them to come out on a Wednesday night when they got to drive a half an hour to get here and then a half an hour to go home. So all of this plays a part in what you can actually do, and you're going to build the church around the primary gifts that you have. Sue?
I was going to say, I also like the recording aspect that we have now, because that gives the younger people that can't come the opportunity to hear what you're saying, and then the older people, when they go on long trips, I mean, last year when we were gone, I don't think I missed a Sunday, I was on, listening to it, usually while he was driving, so I was making him listen.
I really cannot say enough about it. It's super cool. And I run into people all the time that know about the church from online stuff. And I just think that's like amazing, like really, really weird, because I'm not used to that, but really, really neat as well. Well, it did. It doesn't now, but to get all of this set up that we have, and you're looking at somewhere around $15,000 to get the church, the parish hall, my office all set up. And what we're doing, and I'm just going to say this real quick and then we're going to jump back in there, but what we're doing right now can be done infinitely better and draw more people, and we actually know how to do it now. We're just waiting till after my sabbatical because a lot of it hinges on me doing different things. But we're anticipating that we're gonna increase our subscribers pretty quickly. And we already started doing some of it, and we've already seen some of that. So I'm pretty excited about the future of the online stuff. But so let's jump back into this. Okay, so religion of law, the sad reality is that most churches operate from one of these perspectives, and that becomes the law of the church in a sense. The church has become a religion of law. Do these things for salvation, do these things, and you're out. And so what I mean by that is problems with this is knowing what to do does not enable us to do it. And I'm going to go through this slide. This slide is not going to make a lot of sense until we jump into the next slide. But knowing what to do does not enable us to do it. That's one of the main problems with the religion of law. Just because I say to you, look, drugs are bad, stop doing them. It doesn't mean that you're actually able to just stop doing them. And we do this, we think that it works this way. Give people knowledge and they'll make corrections. You need more than that. And we know this all the time. People with addictions, and many of our problems are addictions. We just don't call them that. But many of the things that we struggle with are things that we know we're not supposed to do, and we just can't stop doing them. And if you're at the Bible study, this might sound familiar. it does not inspire what it commands. So you can command somebody to not do something, and they might even curb their behavior and not do it, but it will not change their heart. You can force actions, but you cannot force a heart change. It's one of the most important things that we miss in the church all the time, is that we can force people to kind of go along with what we're doing, but we will not change their heart unless we really change their heart. You can't just change their actions and assume the heart has changed. The third thing is enough turns out to be a mirage. And what I mean by that is, when have you done enough? And, you know, in my perspective, you've done enough when you hit this. Well, the moment that you hit that, then you haven't done enough. Then I need you to do this. And then I need you to do that. And then you just keep going down that road. And then the promise of wholeness and peace is never realized. What I mean by that is that you are promised that if you do this, like I asked you to, you'll have peace and wholeness and you'll feel right. Then you do it. And then I put another thing out there. And you're never going to get to enough, and you're never going to get to where you realize or to where you get wholeness and peace. So let's look at these two together. So that's the fundamental, that's the problem that I'm identifying. And then this is what we're going to be looking at. So first of all, this is why Christianity, when understood properly, is not a religion of the law, but rather a religion of grace. The understanding of Christianity is always a religion of grace. It's not a religion of law. It's not do this and we're happy with you, do this and you're out. But we have turned it into that in many ways. We've turned it into religion of law. If you do this, then you're in. If you do this, then you're out. So it always operates as a religion of grace. When we fall off the ladder of life that we are all climbing, Jesus picks us up and assures us that we're enough. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Whenever life gets pulled out from under us, we go into, bankruptcy. We get divorced. We, any number of our health fails us. When our girlfriend breaks up, whatever it is that undoes our life, the idea of Christianity is that Jesus can come in, pick you up, and remind you that you are enough. And so we're all doing this, though, in our life, in a variety of ways. We're all climbing ladders. We're all trying to figure out how do we get up there faster? How do we do better? And when we tumble down the ladder, the idea is that Jesus picks us up. So, but the way our churches function today, one might ask, if Jesus caught me and embraced me when I fell off the ladder, why does it feel like I'm on a new ladder? And the idea behind that is that the church becomes the new ladder that you're placed on. So you tumble down, Jesus picked you up, you become a Christian, you join the church, and now you're doing the same thing that you were doing outside the church, but now you're doing it inside the church. Climbing ladders to assure everybody around you that you're enough, that you're sufficient, that you're valuable. And so, why do I have the suspicion that I'm not good enough Christian? And I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but I have felt that way many times in churches, where I feel like I'm continuously trying to prove myself and climb the ladder. And so the Schoolhouse for Saints has a unique ladder. And the other one, I forget what is it. The Hospital for Sinners has its own ladder. And depending on which church you're in and how you're functioning, you're going to have to climb up the ladder. And if you don't climb up the right ladder, you're out. So the emphasis in this model is on personal transformation. Okay? That's what this is. You're supposed to come here, and then you're supposed to leave. And then as you're driving home, you're talking to your spouse, or you're talking to yourself in the car, or you're going to call your daughter or your son or your friend, and you're going to say, you know what I listened to tonight? This guy's talking about church, and he said this, and he said this, and I've really been thinking about that, and it's got me to think that maybe I need to make a change here. I mean, now I know that doesn't happen a lot. But if it happens once, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's what we're aiming for, is personal transformation. I'm not aiming to give you information, you leave here, never think about it again, and then come on Sunday and you say, you know, that's pretty good Wednesday night, and then never think about it again. The idea is that there's some sort of transformation that takes place in your life. That's the aim. Now, you know, it's lofty goals, but you know, that's what they are. But this model emphasizes personal transformation. Its principal purpose being to produce holiness and through holiness, happiness in the present lives of its members. And all that I mean by that is that by coming here and listening to me drone on for an hour, that you are being brought into Jesus closer and closer and closer, and that is having an impact on your life. And that is having a positive, hopefully, that's having a positive impact on your life. And that is the goal of every church that is functioning out of the Schoolhouse for Saints model, is that we're actually affecting people by giving them knowledge and understanding of who Jesus is or how the church functions. Now, it's transformational. You went from this to this. So you went from this creature to this beautiful butterfly. And maybe it was one class. Maybe it was a whole series. Maybe it took a whole year. Maybe it took 5 years. But the idea is that you're being transformed in Christ. You following with me so far? Because it's going to get fun real quick. What happens if the transformation is not nearly as impressive as the priest and other members and even yourself expect it to be? What begins to happen? Well, I'll share with you from a variety of perspectives. So I am doing this, and Keith has been coming here Wednesday after Wednesday after he hasn't, but because I keep attendance, and Keith has been coming Wednesday after Wednesday after Wednesday after Wednesday, and I can't see any difference in him. And I begin to kind of resent Keith because he's not doing what I need him to do. And why do I need him to be transformed? Because I have to justify myself. Because if he isn't transformed, then I'm going to feel bad about myself. Well, maybe I'm not doing a good job. Maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe I'm not a good teacher. Maybe I'm a horrible priest. Maybe any number of things are going on in my mind. And the way that I get it off of me is I start to resent Keith. And I start to say, Keith just isn't putting the work in. Keith just isn't dedicated. Keith just doesn't care about Jesus. Because it can't be my fault, right? It has to be somebody else's fault. So it's Keith's fault. Sorry I'm picking on you. But it is your fault. So on the priest level, that's what begins to take place when transformation, personal transformation, is the thing being emphasized. Then immediately I am saying, well, it's not working, and if it's not working, then it has to be Keith's problem, and then I begin to resent him. But on a members level, it works the same way. So we're all here, okay? And we're all holy apostles. And so you're looking at Keith's transformation, and you're trying to figure out, is he turning into this, or is he still this?
Say that the creature's word. Say that. I was when you go, this creature, you say butterfly, but you can't say that.
I'm not going to say that word, Keith. Eggs. What is he on this scale? And when you do that, what are you doing?
Justifying my progress.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily judging yet. I'm comparing. I want to make sure that if Keith is here still, I'm at least here. I'm at least better than Keith, because I'm trying to climb up the ladder. Because church has become this thing where we're emphasizing this personal transformation. I have to be transformed. And I've got to be transformed further along than other people. And so we end up comparing ourselves with other people. But Keith is also going to do this with himself. Is he's going to look at himself and he's going to say, I don't see anything taking place. And if he doesn't see anything taking place, then he's got a couple options. And the first option is he can say, well, I guess I'm not trying hard enough. And then he can dedicate himself to trying harder, and if that doesn't work, then just keep trying harder. Or he can say, this is all a crock. And I've been spending all of my Wednesdays here, and it hadn't done anything for me. I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to sit in the pews. And then I'm just going to go to church on Sunday. And then if that doesn't work, then I'll eventually just tag out of church completely, because I'm not being transformed the way that I want to. Does any of this resonate with you? So when personal transformation is the thing that we emphasize, this is the danger that we fall into, is that we immediately, I fall into it, you fall into it with other people, you fall into it with yourself, because what is being gauged here is growth. And can we gauge growth? And part of the difficulty of this is, what if the transformation is not perceivable, or what if there's actually negative regression? So let's look at the first one first. What if the transformation that has taken place in Keith is not anything that I can perceive? What kind of transformation is that? What's that?
Internal. It's unseen. You don't know if it's
internal. We got one.
You don't know if he's transforming or not. You might be becoming a saint that you don't know.
Yeah, give me one word for that. What kind of transformation would be taking place in Keith that is not perceivable?
Spiritual.
It's his heart. His heart is changing. His heart is softening. I can't see it. I can't see anything that's taking place in him. But his heart is changing. And that's a massive transformation over many, many years. And so what we end up doing is we end up misdiagnosing people all the time. We end up resenting people for not growing when they're growing in ways that we could never imagine. They're growing in ways that God is doing things in their life that if we knew about it, we would be astounded, we would fall over. But because we can't see it with our eyes, because we can't hear it, it's not present, then it becomes, well, I don't think anything's taking place. And this is the danger in standing back and judging other people. It's the danger in trying to figure out, are you in or are you out? And we do this stuff all the time. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're doing it. We measure ourselves by other people. It's just what we do. We do it at work. We do it in family. I do it. I've got 2 brother-in-laws, and I am the best one. I am the one that cares for my father-in-law and mother-in-law's daughter better than the other two. We do it in every area. Now, obviously, that's not true. They would say the opposite. But this is what we do. We do this in every area. We compare ourselves with other people because it's the only gauge we have. There are no other gauges. This is the gauge and the lens that we have. So we're always climbing the ladder comparing ourselves. But if you're not in the Schoolhouse for Saints, or there's another one, for the gospel to retain the power and the church its effect, you must either manufacture some growth. So say I'm looking at you and I don't perceive anything, and the rest of the people are looking at you, they don't perceive anything, and you're even looking at yourself and you're not perceiving that there's transformation taking place. If you don't see that, then what you're going to have to do is manufacture some. Yeah? You're going to have to produce some. Or you're going to have to pretend that transformation is taking place. You're going to have to fake it. Or you're going to have to hide certain parts of you. And these are all things that we do. You know the saying, I can't promise to change, but I promise I'll pretend to change? These are all things that we do. When we're in a certain environment, we will either, if we don't feel like we belong, and I was just in one of those with all clergy, and I never feel like I belong with clergy, then we fake it, or we hide certain parts of us, or we manufacture something real quick. I'm going to have to get real clergy real quick. Those are things that we do when we don't perceive transformation taking place. The last thing on here is the disconnect between who we and others feel we're supposed to be and who we actually are is often monitored, weighed, and measured in the church. Not just by you, but by everybody around you, and especially your priest. Because your failure reflects on me. And that is how it's perceived in the life of the church. Now, good clergy will make sure that they do not do that. Good clergy will make sure that they are not in a place where they're resenting the parishioners because they're struggling. But oftentimes what you find is that what is being looked at is, are you transforming? Because if you're transforming, then that's going to reflect really well on me. Or if other people are looking at you, are you transforming? And are you transforming more than me? Do I need to step up my game? And other people are wondering, am I transforming at all? We're not going to do all that. So you're climbing the next group, Hospital for Saints. Does that first group make sense, though? Anybody want to push back on ideas on there? I feel like I got a little bit of pushback coming. No?
I have one pushback.
Yeah.
You are real clergy, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Well, I feel like real clergy. I just don't feel like clergy around other clergy. All right, so Hospital for Saints. What ends up happening, and this happens all the time, or for sinners, this happens all the time, is that people will find themselves in these churches. The first group of churches we looked at, they're generally conservative churches. They're generally emphasizing personal transformation. And what will happen is that they'll get burned out because there's so much expectation for them to transform their lives that they can't do it anymore. And what they'll end up doing is they'll end up shifting to a more liberal side. I've got to get away from all this unreasonable expectation that is heaped on me. It's too much. And it is oftentimes. And so what they do is they run over to the more liberal side, only to find that they're trading one set of imperatives for another. And the liberal side has its own imperatives attached to it. And this is what I mean by if you believe this and you do this, you're in this church. If you don't, you're out in this church. So it depends on what church you're actually in. So you will see people posting things like, if your church doesn't preach about immigration reform this Sunday, it's time to go to another church. Have you seen those? All right. Are you on Twitter? Okay. So if you were on Twitter, after every major political event, there will be massive amounts of people posting on Twitter that if your church doesn't preach about whatever the event was, it's time to find a new church. This Sunday would be gun control, for sure. Yep. And they're all over the place. And a lot of times they're put out there by clergy, but not always. So you can see the shift that's already taken place. So instead of a shift towards personal transformation, what is the shift towards now here? Well, it's not necessarily political, but it does sometimes trend in the political arena. What did you say, Tom?
Save others.
Save others. Yeah, immigration reform is political, but it falls under a broader umbrella of reaching out to the lost, the poor, the destitute, the broken, and bringing those in. Because remember, we're in the hospital for sinners now. And that is the emphasis. So anything that falls under that emphasis, that is what is being pushed and taught and preached. And so you'll see things like this that say, you know, if they don't do this, then go to another church, because what's being emphasized is you've got to lift up the broken. Now, the message is clear. The church's primary function is to stand with the hurting, broken, lost. And then the question that follows, though, after that is, are you doing it? And that is where the pressure immediately comes on you all. In the same way that the conservative church is heaped on personal transformation, and I'm standing up here and I'm teaching, and then the thought is, well, are you transforming? It's all right, I'll just wait. I'll just wait for it. Turn into a butterfly right before my eyes. Well, the same thing is taking place over here. It's just the message has shifted. The message has shifted. So now it's not, are you personally transforming? Now the message is, are you helping the hurting, broken, and lost? Are you? And if you answer yes to that, then you've got to pull out your resume. And you've got to go through all the ways that you're doing it. And maybe it's sufficient to me, or maybe it's not. And maybe you can justify yourself by your resume, but chances are you won't be able to. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to out-resume you. And just in the same way in the conservative churches, I didn't go over that slide, but in the conservative churches, what they try and do is out-Christian you. I'm going to out-Christian you. I'm going to be more spiritual than you. I'm going to be the one that walks into the group and says, did we pray? I'm going to be the one that carries my Bible everywhere we go. I'm going to be the one that does all the things that remind you that I'm always thinking about Jesus. I'm going to out-Christian you. And if you ever go to seminary, it's a terrible place. And they try to out-Christian you so much. Every gift you get is going to be this Christian, like, you can't just get a normal gift. It's gotta be some crazy Christian gift. It's too much. But over here, they're not going to try and out-Christian you. They're going to try and out-resume you. And what they're going to try and show is, I'm not sure that you care for the lost, broken, and hurting as much as you should. And it's going to have the same effect. So as the priest, I'm looking at you all and I'm saying, you all are not doing enough. And because you're not doing enough to help these people, this is reflecting poorly on me. and I need you to do it. And so the author just has this, this little quote in here. In other words, perform, damn it. And I just thought it was priceless. Because you've got this angry priest up there, and the whole message is, I've been preaching and telling you how important it is to reach out to these people, how much Jesus cares that you do it, and if you're not doing it, then that doesn't look good for me. So I need you to perform. I need you to go out there and do it. And so in both camps, what you ultimately have, is people still trying to climb up a ladder. People still trying to prove that they're worthy, that they have value, that their life has meaning. And the very reason you were brought into the church is that Jesus scooped you up off the ground, picked you up and said, you're enough. And then he put you in his church. And the moment that you got into his church, you found the first ladder you could find. And you started climbing that sucker as fast as you could to show that you have enough. And the whole job of ministry and of Jesus and of clergy and of the people around you is to take you off of the ladder, put you back down, and remind you that you're enough. That doesn't mean that personal transformation is not something that we strive for. It doesn't mean that reaching out to the lost, the broken, the hurting, and I pushed all kind of buttons, but I'm not using that anymore. It doesn't mean that those things aren't important. They are. They're immensely important, and we should be doing them. But that's not where you get your worth, value, and meaning. Your worth, value, and meaning is tied up into who you are in Jesus. And that is it, full stop. And so much of church is about climbing ladders to prove that. And so as we end this series, really what we're ending on is what we're actually doing right here, church. And there are right ways to do church and there are wrong ways to do church. And neither of those ways that I presented to you are wrong ways to do church unless you lose Jesus in the process. But the wrong way is trying to prove that you have worth and value by what you can contribute. Because your worth and your value come from being in Christ. And then you contribute out of that, out of the abundance of what Jesus has given you. And so that ends the series. I am done. It's 8 o'clock. I get a reward. All right. Yeah. Questions, comments? What do you got?
Real quick, we forgot to pass the little basket around, but if you look over there, we set it on the table. You can either pass it around or put it on the way out. Sorry.
I sweat a lot today.
I need counseling.
I know you do, Keith.
We're going to get you a towel.
It's been a very long day, though. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. You should have transformed better.